Hello and welcome to the PublishU podcast, where we explore the real life stories of authors from around the world. Today, we're talking to Paul Friend from Exeter in Devon in the United Kingdom, who's written a book called Fierce Humility. Paul, welcome. It's great to see you.
It's great to be with you.
And tell us about you, Exeter, Devon. For those people who don't live in the UK, tell us about where you live.
So I live. I actually live in the middle of nowhere. I recently moved about 18 months ago with my wife, and we've got two teenage boys. And we're renovating a crazy old house in the middle of the country. And Devon is part of the southwest. It's quite rural, and we love it.
Wonderful, wonderful. And what is it you do in Devon? I mean, what's your work? Are you just a full-time renovator of a beaten-up property?
No,
Or
no,
if that's
not
not
at all.
insulting it.
I head up a charity called SWIM, which is Southwest Youth Ministries, where we train and support youth and children's workers working in churches and schools right across the Southwest. So that's kind of my day job.
Amazing. And how many youth workers in churches and schools would you be engaging with each year?
So we train. We've got a team of about 50 trainees based around the region, but then we're engaging with hundreds of churches through camps and events and festivals throughout the year, as well as kind of volunteer training stuff as well.
Fantastic. And do you think every county in the United Kingdom should have a swim?
Good question. I think there's something quite unique about the Southwest where we have a real tight regional identity. And so there aren't a lot of equivalents to us in other regions, although there's a lot of national organizations. So I think it would be great to have other regional versions, but whether they work in quite the same way, who knows?
Yeah, fantastic. And Paul, you've written a book. How long have you had the desire in you to write a book?
I would say it was something I was intimidated by. I was never very academic. I did do a master's about 15 years ago, and that was a real challenge. And then over the last few years, I've just had a few friends and mentors just kind of saying, I feel like there's a book in you. I'd really love to encourage you to think about writing. And so I just was mulling that over, and I was coming up to a sabbatical with my work, where I'd got 12 weeks off, and thought,
Nice.
well, this could be a unique moment, opportunity to do some writing. So I kind of dived in and went for it.
Yeah. And what was when people come to take on a new challenge, such as writing a book, there's normally some kind of little things they need to overcome in themselves. What were the things that you needed to overcome in yourself to actually commit to writing the book?
I think as a person, I'm much more of a verbal communicator than a writer. I'm used to speaking in front of lots of people, but to be able to articulate and I tend to write how I speak, which isn't always the best. So one of the things I had to overcome was just getting my mindset around. For me, a chapter felt like a big deal. And someone I spoke to just said, just think about it like a talk, and think about an introduction and your main content, and then drawing it to conclusion. I thought, oh, that's actually really helpful. So there were some things about actually writing it, and then some things, I guess, internally. I was writing about humility. That is an oxymoron in itself. So just getting over the concept. I'm not trying to say I'm humble, but this is something I am passionate about and want to grow to be more like. And so getting over some of my insecurities or concerns about what I was writing, as well as how to write, probably a big thing.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone. Many people face those little hurdles along the way. So you wrote about humility. Humility is a strange word because there aren't many replacements for the word humility, are there? I mean, you speak to a lot of young people, Paul. I mean, how do you explain humility to young people?
I think I think quite a good way to explain it is just looking at the opposite. So, what's the opposite of humility? It's pride, ego, all of those things.
Writing a book.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
I'm heading into this thing going, how on earth do you publicize and advertise selling a book on humility? It's bonkers. But there we go. So I think a lot of it is talking about lowering ourselves and about thinking of ourselves less. There's obviously a famous quote around that. But thinking about how explaining humility within the context of thinking of serving others and thinking of others. And I guess one thing I talk a little bit about is there's a difference between being humbled, which is when we end up looking stupid because we made a mistake, and humbling ourselves, which is an active choice, and kind of making that distinction.
And people who are humble, they're more. Well, personally, I'm ready to listen to them more.
Yeah.
And take more notice of what they say, and
Yeah.
take more notice of what they do. So actually, in terms of leadership, humility is a fundamental, actually, I don't know what you want to call it, value, attribute, part of the DNA of leadership. How do you think leaders can make that choice to humble themselves rather than being humiliated? I mean, yeah, we all get humiliated at times, but how can we make humbling ourselves more of a choice as a leader so that other people are more willing to hear our heart and hear our voice and hear our thoughts on things?
I think for me, it's all about choice. I think in terms of choosing, and I think in terms of the world right now, in terms of politics, but also in terms of the church, we've just got so many examples of kind of celebrity, ego, stage, and I think there's a general cynicism, skepticism around leadership, around the character around leadership. And so I think as emerging leaders, we need to be encouraging people to say this is core. Character is core. Before ability and gifting, we've got to invest in our character. And so in the book, I kind of split it in half really and talk about how do we humble ourselves firstly before God, which I think is where we have to start. And I talk about dependence and spending time with Him, as well as rest and things like that. And then secondly, how we humble ourselves before others, which I think is often the one that we perhaps find more difficult, which is, about forgiveness and being able to work through our issues, and about accountability. And I think if we really want to go after humility, we've got to have people around us who spot our blind spots, point them out and encourage us to not take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah, very good. So you've published a book, or we've published a book for you. It's really exciting. Your book is now out there for the world to enjoy, called Fierce Humility. What is for you? What is the one takeaway that you hope people walk away with having read your amazing book?
I think my takeaway would be that it would leave people with a desire to lead differently, to lead their teams differently, to be more honest, more open, more approachable, more teachable, more humble themselves. But then that they would fiercely, and this is really the concept of the book that I think we see in Jesus, someone who fiercely fights against pride in his followers. We see statements like "not so with you" and "get behind me, Satan," and these kind of strong, in your face kind of abruptness. But I think it's this kind of recognition that pride can just kill everything. And so I would hope that it would lead people with that same kind of pursuit after humility for themselves, but also for those that they're leading and the teams and the organizations that they're leading.
Yeah. Wow, that's quite quite an aspiration for the book. I often say to people, writing a book is like writing a journal on a subject. It's like journaling, you know, and that it requires quite a lot of self-reflection to write a book. And I just wondered, Paul, when you wrote Fierce Humility, what changed in you as you wrote the book? And what impact has that had in your leadership and in your teams?
I think one of the reasons I wanted to write about the topic was because it was something I was really passionate about and was trying to model within my team that I lead here, but recognizing I was a million miles away and that I had so much more to learn. And so to have the opportunity to really dig in and study and think more deeply was an amazing opportunity. And it felt honestly like I was doing heart surgery on myself.
Wow.
In terms of every chapter that I was writing, it was like, and the books that I was reading around it as I was studying, it was like, wow, this is like a hugely challenging process, incredibly humbling process. And so I think hopefully for me, it's something that I still recognize that, there's a great line from R.T. Kendall, which I use right at the end of the book, where he says, as soon as you think you're humble, you've lost it. And so I think for me, it's left me just with a desire to be pursuing humility every day, to be lowering myself before God and others. And so I would say, I like to think that I've changed, but I hope that I am going on a journey of continually pursuing humility in my own life.
Yeah. And how do you think the people around you will have noticed that, Paul?
Great question. I'd like to think by seeing that I'm asking more questions, that I'm listening more rather than needing to control or be so directive, and hopefully a bit more chilled out in the process, because it's humility is about letting go.
Yeah. I love that. I often think humility, and it's about lowering the view we have of ourselves and increasing the view that we have of others, including God. I'm really excited that your book is now out there, excuse me, and globally available. It's a great title, Fierce Humility, and I'm sure there are many people listening now who are going to go out there and get the book and not only learn about humility, but learn how they can make that choice you described to be more humble in the way they live and in the way they lead. So thank you, everybody, for listening to the PublishU podcast featuring the real life stories of authors from around the world. If you're interested in becoming an author like Paul, please visit PublishU.com. And if you enjoyed this broadcast, make sure you subscribe for more. And thank you very much, and goodbye for now.